for public comments today?
I have no requests.
All right. And I'd ask Princess if there are any modifications to our consent calendar this time.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have a modification. We would like to modify and amend the requested actions to item 5G. This is the agreement that we're proposing with UCR for StinkNet research. And we would like to amend the requested actions as follows. 1, we would like to approve in concept a professional services agreement between the rchca and the Regents of the University of California on behalf of its Riverside campus for conservation research related to StinkNet. 2, pending council's approval as to legal form, we're requesting that you authorize the rchca general manager to execute, sign, and administer the agreement. And 3, we ask that you authorize the general manager to execute any future amendments to the agreement if necessary, so long as such amendments do not result in an overall monetary increase of the multi-year professional services agreement total amount of $53,705, as long as such amendments are approved as to form by council.
All right, thank you. Any problems with that on the board here? All right. A motion and a second. Are we live here?
Can anybody see any voting options on their screen?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and I would like to just make one clarification. It's actually item 5H, not 5G.
Mr. Chair, do you want to go ahead and vote on the consent calendar first?
Well, consent calendar as modified.
You want to do it as a whole? Okay,
Sure.
just a moment.
Don't see any voice.
Give me a second.
We just want to do manual?
Nope, you should see it now.
There it is. I just knew you were over.
Wait a second. All right.
City of Corona, please vote. There you go. Thank you, sir.
All right. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Princess. Moving right on to reports. First item on the list for reports is the election of our board of directors. As I understand, the position from Temecula is currently vacant. Temecula would have been the natural successor for the chair, so as such we have 2 open seats. We're looking at a chair and a vice chair, correct? So at this time, we would take a nomination for chair, if there is any.
I have. Do you want me to do a request?
Certainly.
Formal?
Chair recognizes Ms. Edwards.
Mr. Chairman, I know after discussions that Marietta City Council member Jonathan Ingram would be interested in being nominated for chair.
Okay. So we have a nomination for Ingram for chair.
Second.
And a second. Any other nominations for chair? All right. Would you like a vote on that, or does that sound like an all in favor to me?
Chair as well?
Certainly. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
Nominate Mr. Manis.
Oh, sure.
Second.
Mr. Manos, and seconded by Supervisor Ashley. Any other nominations for vice chair? All right. Congratulations. We will have a new chairman and vice chair.
And can we finalize with a vote, please?
Yes. Here, let me.
You not see it?
No, it's just, it was weird.
We do.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, we're good now.
We took care of it, didn't we?
You gotta be fast.
I know,
City of Corona, please vote. Thank you, sir.
I heard that.
Ms. Edwards, you have your
Okay.
request to speak? You're good.
No,
Okay.
that was left over from
Okay.
the last.
Excellent. All right. Good enough. All right up to 6B, status report, status update, and I cannot read the rest of on the Stevens Kangaroo recovery efforts. Ms. Esther.
Good morning. I'm just going to wait for my presentation to come up. Awesome. Okay, awesome. All right, so good morning. I'm Princess Esther. I'm your Administrative Services Officer for the rchca. And one more slide. Oh, you're right. Thank you. And I am providing a status report on our SKR recovery efforts. We continue to work with Fish and Wildlife Service, our local Carlsbad office, to demonstrate SKR recovery. And so I want to provide you a report on our activities. In October, we issued a request for a proposal for our habitat suitability model. This model, as you recall, is going to be very beneficial to the rchca as we move forward with our requirement to implement a range-wide monitoring protocol. It'll also be very beneficial to our partners like the RCA in their acquisition strategy. So just a basic review, this model will help us to identify specific areas that SKR is located, and we can use those models going forward with policies and procedures for how we identify SKR location. This was one of the requirements of the SKR Draft Recovery Plan from 1997, so this is one more tool that the rchca will have in its arsenal in order to be able to demonstrate our SKR recovery. So for the RFP, we received 2 proposals, and we are in the process of evaluating them. We're working directly with Fish and Wildlife to make sure that the proposals meet their requirements for us to demonstrate this habitat suitability model. And after review and selection, we'll be bringing those agreements back to you for your review and approval, and possibly at the February meeting.
Great.
So moving forward, I discussed at the last meeting that we were going to send a letter to the Director for Fish and Wildlife at the Carlsbad office to ask them to formally adopt the SKR Draft Recovery Plan from 1997. So this plan is still in draft form, and even though for these years we've been working towards meeting those requirements and working through this draft plan as if it is adopted. Fortunately, we've got some good news that the letter was not necessary, and that Fish and Wildlife staff is preparing a briefing paper to submit to their executives. So this briefing paper is a summary of facts associated with SKR recovery and the efforts that are being made on the Western Riverside, on behalf of Western Riverside, and staff is going to provide recommendations and courses of action to adopt the SKR recovery plan as being formal. And one of the things that I'm going to work closely with Fish and Wildlife Service on this particular project is to make sure that there are no new requirements that are added to that draft recovery plan, because we have been using this as our model to demonstrate recovery for all of these years, and we just want to make sure that they're not going to add any new requirements to us. And they've been very amenable in working with us. They've discussed that finalization and adoption of the draft plan will take about 6 to 8 months. So we'll work to make sure that they kind of, keep us in the loop with the information. And in May of this year, our rchca staff visited Washington, D.C., and we had the opportunity to introduce the rchca's program, and we had an opportunity to discuss with our legislators some of the challenges and the efforts that we've made as far as demonstrating SKR recovery. So we thought that that was a really great trip. What we're liking to do now is to visit our legislators in Sacramento. We feel as though they have a direct connection on a local level with SKR. They're very knowledgeable with SKR, and we know that Fish and Wildlife is going to need some support in going forward to continuing to work on helping us move towards SKR recovery, not only for our area, but also for the northern San Diego area. So at this time, staff is requesting that we identify a group that can visit Sacramento, share our successes, and introduce our agency to our local legislators, and then also to share some of the concerns that we have with the wildlife directors regarding the rchca. Previously, the people that attended the DC trip was the board vice chairperson, Dr. Ron. It was our executive director, Rick Bishop, myself, and then we also had a staff member from WRCOG that assisted us. And so now that we have a new chair and a new vice chair, we'd like to, continue some of that continuity, but then also have someone else from the board attend the Sacramento trip with us.
So chair, vice chair. Member from Temecula.
Okay.
The question, do we know when that will be on the calendar?
So we'll try to get that on the calendar right after the holidays. I'll be in touch with you to let you know. And one other caveat, we're looking at the expense to be about $3,000 for the trip. And we'll get something scheduled that meets along with your schedules.
Thank you very much. So do we need to move to approve this, Mr. Chairman?
Was a report.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. So,
Move to approve?
Second.
yeah, motion a second.
Do that on your.
Let's record the votes.
Lost my screen there.
Slow. I'll move then so we can get going, if it will. There. So, there. Now take that.
There it goes.
Sorry.
Got it. Yeah, there we go. All right, we're good.
We need to get a supervisor to speed this system up.
Ours is too. Like, you can click this and it'll open the agenda.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we're good.
For the council members,
All right.
Okay.
Ms. Edwards, comment.
Yeah, I'd like everyone to think about the fact that of the thousands of endangered species, we can probably count on both hands the numbers of those that have been delisted over the years. And so if we're successful in this endeavor, that will be a huge coup in Riverside County's MSHCP cap, and something that we can put on our bio and resume, so to speak. So I think it will give us a lot of credibility in Washington and Sacramento.
Absolutely.
So, everybody think about it. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Marietta?
great job. I think this program has been one of the most successful in all of Southern California's 58 counties. And the supervisor and I had the privilege of being in D.C. last week in regard to refuges, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to bring some additional peripheral money towards this program as well to help in the future with endowments and other things, so that we can make sure to maintain this program and all the hard work that's gone into it.
Thank you.
How's that air flight coming home?
Okay, this is for on the record. American Airlines sucks. They've got a second from the supervisor. Now I know what sardines feel like.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 6C, report on educational outreach programs.
All right, 6C. Thank you, Princess Hester, again, your Administrative Services Officer, and I would like to report on the success that we had this year at our endangered species events. I'm changing the title to Celebrating Endangered Species because normally we would call it, Endangered Species Act Day, but we know that ESA Day is actually in May, and we host these events in September and October to coincide with the school's calendar. This year we had over 600, almost 700 5th and 6th grade students from areas of Hemet, Harupa, Lake Elsinore, Paris, and Riverside Unified School Districts. So they participated in the event. I think I worked the guys a lot. We had a great time. The theme where our world and the natural world meet was demonstrated by expert biologists. We have partners that came out from the Department of Waste Resources, and they talked to the students about composting. They went in between hands-on learning stations. We had Wild Wonders out that did a live animal presentation. And so it was a great event, and I'd like to really thank you for your support and your continued support in this event every year. We started this event off with, I think, 35 Girl Scouts from a particular troop, and now it has grown to be the exciting and the connected event that it is. So the students are going to participate in an art contest, and we'll bring you some of those pictures back at a future meeting. And we're looking forward to next year. I'm already receiving some contacts from the schools that are interested in participating. My goal next year is to host a school from every jurisdiction. So I need to add on a couple of classes. We need to extend a couple of dates. I actually yesterday met with Department of Waste Resource employees, and Supervisor Ashley is going to be attending a ribbon cutting event at Lambs Canyon. They now have a recreation and educational facility there, so we might also look at partnering with Waste Resources to even host an event for the students to teach them about composting, to teach them about reduce, reuse, recycling. We're really looking forward to how this program is growing, so I'd like to really thank you for your support, and I know that the kids and the teachers thoroughly enjoyed their event.
Mr. Sheriff, I may.
Yes, Marietta.
So one of the things that I'm hoping we can do this coming year is reach out to some of the private schools as well. My daughter is a teacher at St. Jean's.
Okay.
And when they had found out, they go, well, how do we get involved with this? And the same with Oaks Christian and other schools that are in the region. I think it would be beneficial if we could reach out to them as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you
sir.
so much.
So we gear this program to be connected with the national, the NGSS, which is the New Generation Science Standards. Those are applicable to schools across the board, whether they are public, charter, private. Those standards are now being implemented, and the environmental initiative is a big part of the NGSS standards. We're working with the educational collaborative that is connected to the oh gosh, I'm going to forget the name. We're working with Educational Collaborative and to also expand some of the environmental components of our program, and so this is really successful. So, thank you.
So along the lines of the discussion of getting more schools involved,
Yes.
I know that Menifee was one of those schools, one of those areas that was not represented. I did a little bit of poking around, and as we all know, the educational system is struggling, and field trips are kind of falling by the wayside. It's taking a big effort from parents pushing for those field trips, and as we discussed, there's booster clubs and PTAs and things like that you can reach out to. So I got the Menifee Valley PTA president's number here. Her name is Shira Smith. Her number is 951-236-3763. I'd be willing to bet if you can connect with her, she can get you in touch with other regional PTA associations, and you can spread this like a virus.
That's
and get
excellent.
a lot more people involved. So,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah. Boys and Girls Club, Southwest County, the buses, everything. Yeah.
Yep.
So-
Excellent. Thank you, and that
You bet.
concludes my report.
All righty. Receive and file. 6D, we have a report on the SKR management. Brian.
Thank you. Nice seeing you all again. Member Edwards, welcome back. Hopefully, maybe some more in the future, possibly. So, let's see, my presentation on. All right. So today we're going to concentrate basically on some of our contractual arrangements for species management. SKR management kind of takes place between January and pretty much July, and then we kind of do our report writing and stuff. And there's a few months in the fall where it kind of slows down. So we try to do some contracted work. It brings a little revenue in, pays for some of our tech positions and stuff. Keeps it interesting from a biological perspective, working with other species and everything. So we're just going to briefly talk about what we do as far as other species management is concerned today. And so we'll concentrate on MWE task orders. Some of those will be burrowing owl management, repairing restoration, fairy shrimp training, and partnerships. Oh, Metropolitan Water District. I apologize. The wholesale water distributor. And
There's another one out there.
I'm going to get to that. I was going to bring one in for the fairy shrimp because
You're going to bring one in?
I was going to, and I forgot it. It's in a little vial, but it's tiny, tiny, tiny. So, but it's interesting, somewhat. I'm kind of playing fast and loose with the word interesting, I guess. But anyway, we'll get to it. So some of the MWE task orders, so they contract with the rchca to do a lot of their species management, and they have about 65 different species in their area that they are required to manage and monitor. And so they contracted with the rchca to provide that management and monitoring. The things they contracted with us with this past couple months, they want to do a turtle survey. So there's a lot of turtles that are non-native in their waterways and their reservoirs. Those turtles prey on species that are covered under the Western Riverside MSHCP. They're MSHCP, like western spadefoot toads, western pond turtles. So we have a lot of non-native things in there, and we're trying to protect these few native stuff. We have to get these turtles out of there. So we're setting up basking traps. We're going to monitor those throughout the winter, and they're paying us about $4,760, and we'll remove those turtles from that. It's mostly our soft-shelled spiny turtles, so hopefully not too many snapping turtles or anything too dangerous, but you know, we'll keep our eye out for them. So the other, well, they can bite pretty hard. So. And so the other thing is we're bat survey. There's 4 species of bats covered under Lake Matthews MSHCP. Most of them are little brown bats, pipistrelles, myodes species. And so we're setting up an acoustic monitor. It shouldn't take up too much of staff's time. It's kind of neat. We found a Western Acoustics, I believe, sells a monitor, and it's neat because it has software in it that detects the frequencies the bat emits in their sonic location. You run it through some software, and based on that frequency, it can kind of tell you what species there is. So it's a real quick way to know what's out there. You don't know how many are out there, but you know it's present. And for our purposes and for other people's purposes in these MSHCPs, presence is the whole game in most instances. You just need to know that they are on the land and using it. So we're going to move that around again seasonally. It doesn't get too cold down here, so we're not looking really for any hibernacula where they would hibernate. They mostly go in what's called a torpor, and they slow down, but they're pretty active all year round. So we'll look for the bats. We'll report back if we see anything. The big one would be the Townsend bat. It's an endangered bat. We don't know if it's out there or not. There's never been really any formal surveys other than the ones that recently that was performed by the county due to the Cajalco road widening project. So they went up and down Cajalco Road and looked for bats, but nobody ever went too far into the reserve. So we'll keep an eye out and listen. And then weed management and mapping. So we did you've seen the stink net research that is hopefully be approved in the future here and funded. And so part of the problem we talked about last time was this stink net, this weed that was just taking over our reserves in a fashion that we've never seen before, even with the grasses. It pretty much excludes everything else. And we're finding out that K-rats probably don't use it very well. And so we're really aware that this thing needs to be taken care of in our reserves. We don't make any kind of assumptions that we're going to maintain it or control it throughout the county, but we don't want to get established in our reserves. So MWD is also very concerned about it because they have obligations for many of their projects for K-rats and other things. And so they've paid us now $21,098 to do a lot of mapping, and where we find it to start spraying the herbicide. The herbicide will be developed with the trials coming from that stink net research project. And they are contributing $28,699 of that total cost to us. So they're basically giving us the majority of the funding, the revenue going into that. So I think the overall contract was $53,000 or so. The rchca will only be paying a portion of that. And so that should give us the cocktail of herbicides that we can use to really knock this stuff down. And then the other one, burrowing owl enhancement. Why do we care about burrowing owls? Western Riverside cares about burrowing owls because you need 60 pair of owls in this county under the Western Riverside MSHCP. Once you get 60 pair, a lot of the survey requirements on developers goes away for that species. It can be rather expensive, so anything we can do. Lake Matthews is one of those core reserves set aside for burrowing owls. So the enhancement project winds up putting in artificial nest boxes. And then hopefully we get some colonization there, and then we can add the boxes, and hopefully the ground schools take over and they expand the population naturally. Right? We don't know. There's this sticking point. And so in order to count them, you need to band them. Nobody has really a consistent banding method yet. This is something that needs and should be worked out because you don't know if you've seen that same owl once or 10 owls one time. In Western Riverside, every person that has the banding permit has a different color and a different number through the banding lab up north. And so there is no consistency in the way we count them at this point. We can go out to Lake Matthews, and I can count 17 owls out there, and I'm pretty sure there's that many. But there's no way to really document it without having that individual ankle bracelet on them with a unique number. And so that needs, in the future, when you work through these MSHCPs and they start really, trying to meet those species objectives, that's something that you want to take a look at. How do you consistently mark these things so you can count them? Until then, you just keep, conserving, and developers have to continue to pay that survey fee for burrowing owl surveys. So it's an easy objective. It's not, I shouldn't say easy, but it's a defined objective. A lot of these other objectives aren't necessarily defined in that sense. And so once you reach that threshold, theoretically, it all goes away. So it's something that we should look into. Not necessarily our agency. We're not responsible necessarily for burrowing owls, but other agencies should work with the banding labs and the state to come up with an overall way of counting them. So,
Completed on the topic, it may be that we're looking for a consensus to go back and speak with Mr. Landry and get Mr. Bishop together to see if we can move forward on finding a banding program so that we know that how we're going to identify the pairs that we have in the future.
theoretically, the way we biologists have contemplated it is that any kind of banding in western Riverside or Riverside County, because the Coachella Valley also has an MSHCP in the eastern end of our county, and they also have to have a certain amount of owls. So in Riverside County, if the banding lab is going to hand out bands and permits, those banders should be required to have a unique color and a unique number system. So anybody that bands in Riverside County, say, has a red band with the number, 1 through whatever, 1,000 or something like that. And so you can just pass out those bands, and if you see a red band, it's a Riverside County one. Right now, you have white bands, red bands, blue bands, black bands. It's all over the place. You don't know where they come from or how many there are. So that's the way biologists would probably work it, is to have it in Riverside County. Instead of, right now, the way the system works, every bander gets their own bands.
Right.
But-
Well, no, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think that's why it needs to come back. Staff needs to do a report on this, see if we can get Mr. Bishop and Mr. Lander together and any other people that are involved with MSHCP to set some type of protocol to bring back to the committee.
That would be great. I mean, working with the bird banding lab and the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. I mean,
We don't
Riverside.
know that we have 80 pairs out
You don't
there,
know.
so,
You
yeah,
could have them all right now. In fact, I just went for a bike ride there off of Newport Road in Menifee. I think it's Newport Road. There's a Target, a super Target there. Just on the other side, there's a nice little bike trail go around. It's about a half-mile loop.
Burrowing owls.
It's full of burrowing owls. How many are there? I counted 13 on my little trip around there, but nobody knew about it. And so they should be banded. They're in flood control. Theoretically, they're already on, I wouldn't say conserved land, but it's not going to be developed.
You weren't riding in their habitat, though, right?
No, it's a paved bike loop. It's a paved bike loop around there, and you look in there, there's a bunch of owls.
So, a little backstory on that. That's actually city property.
Okay.
And I received a call from a resident who knew about the burrowing owls when the city went down there with a Bobcat tractor to do weed abatement. And we had to slam the brakes on that.
Yeah.
If you do management, though, that's probably why they're there, in a sense. As long as you're not you're not taking a bulldozer and plowing it, the reason they're probably existing there is because somebody is mowing it. Those weeds are down. They don't like real high weeds. So one of our management techniques for burrowing out is to mow. They don't like anything taller than 6 inches. Otherwise, they take off. Right. So whoever's doing the management, as long as they're driving a tractor over, those owls will either go underground or fly. Yeah. They'll get out of harm's way. Just don't let them move that dirt. But somebody should take a look at it. It's 13 that I counted in a quick trip with and I was watching my kids at the same time. So, count them up. You might have them already.
So sometime in the near future, we'll bring this back to the board.
This item, if we want to meet,
Mr. Executive Director.
we can certainly work with other agencies and try to coordinate this. We have a number of them at Lake Matthews at this point, and then what I was getting at is, the reason MWD is looking at it is, we have a lot on RCHCA property. There's over 60 boxes and some owls on RCHCA property, but we have literally all our eggs in that one basket, and so we're trying to create another area. Say something impacts this population over here, well, a kilometer away, we have another set of boxes and stuff. So this is actually in the lake area, north of Cajalco Road and south of El Sobrante. So it's within MWD's property. So we're going to try to get another second site going there at Lake Matthews. So we did that. So that was $3,652 worth of revenue. Then the distinct that I talked about earlier. So here's what we look like. So this is the government housing we put in there for owls, subsidized housing, and we'll get the ground squirrels hopefully in there, digging our own holes. But and as I said, 60 pair of owls required in the MSHCP area. We're one of 5 core areas for burrowing owls, and we said, we try to get all our eggs out, not in one basket. So we have to be down a certain height, depth, and the reason we have to do that, we have to dig a pretty deep hole. You would think it would be to keep them warm. A lot of people think that's to keep them warm. It's not. It's to keep them cool. And so they can keep themselves pretty warm from fluffing up. But the sun comes, and when these things are fledging and leaving their boxes, it's around June or July. And so the heat will kill them. And so you have to put them down pretty deep. And so, anyway, your biologist there is not just a biologist. That's our senior ecological resource specialist. He's also a excavator operator. So we're multi-talented.
I've never had one of those.
Anyway, and then so some repairing and restoration. So it's pretty expensive to do repairing restorations. So we started taking cuttings and dipping them in root hormone, growing our own out in a little shade structure we created. We had volunteers from Lake Elsinore come up. They were great. There was a Boy Scout group and helped plant them. They planted over 100 cottonwood, 100 mule fat, willow, whatnot, and we grew them out. And then just 2 days ago, we had some volunteers from WRCOG, staff from rchca came out. We planted a number of these plants in one of our areas that was really disturbed in the years past. And so hopefully we'll get some of these trees growing and have a nice, beautiful riparian area that leaf spells vireo and other covered species in western Riverside can take up and occupy. It was a great project and great group of volunteers. There you go. Lots of pictures. I didn't know that was in there. It's nice. Oh, okay. So the fairy shrimp. I know it's very exciting.
Brian, really quick.
Yeah.
Steve, you had your light on a second ago. Do you have a question? All right. Thanks. Sorry, Brian.
So the fairy shrimp training. Why are we getting fairy shrimp training? There are 6 endangered species of fairy shrimp in California. And Riverside County is fortunate to have 3 of them. They're in Santa Rosa Plateau. One very specific one that lives in Santa Rosa Plateau's vernal pools. But we also have some at Lake Matthews. Lynchii, this fellow here, zoomed in way under a microscope and looks like this alien thing. But we need to know how to manage it. Western Riverside MSACP, again, it's a covered species. There's supposed to be so many vernal pools in the area to protect this vernal shrimp and whatnot. I didn't know anything about them. And so when it was discovered here, a few years back, I really didn't know how to manage it, and so I wanted to get some training. So we went down to San Diego, and a lady from Texas, actually, we take her class, and you learn all about these shrimp. Very interesting things. They've 453 million years old. They've changed very little. They can go into a cyst and exist for another 1,000 years, basically dead, in a suspended animation. They don't know how it's done, but it goes into a cyst. It can be laid there on the dirt for 1,000 years or more. They don't know. And then when the right conditions are right, it comes back. The interesting thing about them, they're not just found in vernal pools, they're found in road ruts and everything else where there's a temporary pool of water. So they could be everywhere, but we're only really concerned at Lake Matthews about the one that exists in that vernal pool. That thing fills up twice in the 11 years I've been here. It's beautiful. Their vernal pools are really known for their concentric ring of flowers, but there's also the fairy shrimp, which are very unique organisms that live within those things. And what was interesting, we've previously been taught not to let anything disturb that pool. In other words, when I graze sheep out there, don't let them in. It's been fenced off and whatnot. This lady who was teaching the course, she's probably been studying fairy shrimp since the 70s. Her husband was a real well-known researcher in there. It's absolutely essential to disturb these things in some way. Not a huge disturbance, but what happens is those cysts get caught in the clay soil. Even when it rains, they're still kind of trapped in there. So a grazing or even a light, I hate to say driving through, anything that breaks up that crust can release some of those cysts to grow into fairy shrimp. So it was kind of obvious when I first did it. When I had sheep out there and I didn't know this vernal pool was there, I grazed right through it. That year when it was discovered, they were everywhere in this pool. And then I fenced it off. This last rainy season, it filled up again. It was fenced off. I didn't let anything in there because I was told it wasn't supposed to allow anything in there. We didn't have any fairy shrimp. And so now the fence is going to come back down, and we're going to lightly graze through there. I'm not going to run a whole 1,000 through there, but certainly enough to break up the crust. So we're learning, and it was a great experience, and hopefully we'll share that experience with others.
This particular vernal pool, what's intriguing about that, and most don't know when we started studying, is that fowl actually bring a lot of these in that land in there, and they're the ones that disturb it.
They do.
There's only one fairy shrimp that can be consumed, and the eggs still can be defecated out and survive.
Well, they are indestructible, basically. They
They
have
are.
hard
You
case.
gotta eat a lot of those to make a meal.
So,
But you know what?
Far more
Interesting.
about fairy shrimp than I-
The Native Americans used to scoop these things out with a net, like at Mono Lake and stuff. There's some up there. They used to scoop them out with a net, and they would. I mean, but I understand the lady said they actually taste like shrimp. So I don't know. Go for it. You know? So interestingly,
5 minutes, teaspoon.
we'll let you know how it goes if we get some rain this year. So just some miscellaneous stuff. This here is an illegal grading of some property. This is MWD's property, but the rchca owns an easement on MWD's property, so we kind of have to hold MWD's feet to the fire if something happens. This was an accident. We're not going to ask them to do any kind of real restoration, but we do want it fenced to prevent that from, it looks like a turnout now. It's right next to a road, and we've had people now using it as a turnout. So we want to fence it. The other thing was we had an illegal encroachment. This is property that was fenced of ours. It was listed for sale as a beautiful place to build your home site underneath these oak trees next to a stream. So
Nice.
we worked with our attorney, who was great. He got on it, and you know, we got it resolved. They removed the fencing, and they want it surveyed now. I don't know if
Does
they
he like
believe
his
us.
new house there by the creek?
Apparently, it's a beautiful site. I mean, I love it. It's underneath the oak trees. There's a stream that flows all year round right there.
Did the site sustain any damage?
No. So, I mean, other than the fence posts were pounded in the ground, slight holes, but no real damage.
Same for MWD?
The MWD site is right along the road. It is graded. I don't think there was anything but non-native grasses there, so not really. And I will say the K-Rats probably, I mean, I don't want to say they prefer the dirt and they should be all graded, but they've moved in there. So it hasn't hurt the K-Rat, but we certainly don't want it to be disturbed or now or in the future.
So there was no cost associated with,
The only thing we were going to cost is we were requiring whoever is responsible for this to fence it. So there's no fence right along the road. And so we've seen cars turning in there.
and in regard to, maybe a silly question, but because we had to engage our attorney, are we being compensated attorney's cost for having them remove the fence from the property?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Mr. Attorney, is that possible?
Thank you. Yeah, I could certainly look into it, but that could realistically be a pretty hard uphill battle for the most part. At that point, it was just a lot of work. I just fired off some threatening letters to the broker to make sure he got off, and it was effective. So it wasn't a significant sum of money, and it would probably be more effort than worth even trying just to. I'd spend as much time, in other words, trying to get it, honestly. So.
Was it an accident that he listed it for sale?
No, I don't think it was an accident. I think,
Like he was
a
confused
buyer-
over boundaries or something?
I
or-
don't see how you could because it's about 200 feet away from their property boundary. I think buyer beware, because we've seen this in other places where people have bought property and then not realized, hey, this part of the parcel does not belong to that part. They didn't do their due diligence. The title company or whatever didn't do their due diligence. And so their property is actually 200 feet behind the fence there. They have no access to their property, no legal way of accessing
So
it.
it's landlocked.
And it's landlocked. And so in order to sell that property, you almost have to create a situation where you do have access and buildable land. Right behind there, this is a valley, so that's why the oak trees and the streams are. It's a cliff. It's straight up that their property. It's unbuildable in a
So
sense.
if you're going to sell property that's public property, you may as well just
Might-
go in and grade a road because
Might
you've
as well.
already. Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, we're always looking out for this. We've had some encroachment before. We have squatters before. It's nothing new. I just want to keep you abreast. We actively patrol all our land and make sure nothing like this exists. This was done over a weekend, so we caught it the next week. And our attorney was great. He got right on it, and whether he threatened or cajoled them into doing it, it was promptly taken care of. So at the last meeting, there was a question like, who do we partner with? Do we communicate with others? And so starting from the last meeting to this meeting, I started writing down everybody I coordinated with in some fashion. This is the list you see in front of us. These are probably only a small portion. Again, it's in the last quarter. A lot of these I coordinate with frequently. Some of these, not so much. Today, interestingly enough, we're partnering with the coroner. There was a skull found out on MWD land this morning, and so we're going back and forth with them. But most of these folks are our regular partners, and they've helped us in numerous ways over the years, whether it's just funding or time or equipment or expertise. Most notably is the private property owners. It's almost last, but certainly not least. They're our eyes and ears out there, and they really help us. They're the ones that give us that first indication that something is amiss, and then we can respond and take care of it. So I wanted to make sure that's pointed out. Our neighbors are one of our biggest benefits. So, any questions?
Thank you for a great report.
Thank you, Brian. All right, moving right along to the Executive Director's report. Mr. Bishop?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one thing to report, and I know this board has expressed concerns before about the fact that these are publicly owned lands and yet they are not accessible to the public. At least officially they're not, but we all know that the public does access them. It's just in the form of illegal access, and there's usually trespassing and damage to these lands that's done with that. So one of the ideas that we've been working on with your knowledge for the course of the past, during the course of the past year or so, is to see if we can find a way to introduce limited real public access for hiking and things of that nature, educational purposes. And in doing so, it might be able to reduce our costs and having to try to, continue to put signage up and fencing to keep the public out. So we're taking that approach and really pleased that we've been making some progress, particularly in the Lake Matthews Reserve area and a portion of the Steel Peak Reserve area. So at our next meeting, we'd like to provide an update with the board on the progress that we're making towards allowing some implementation for some true public access. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. That sounds very promising. All right, are there any items for future agendas requested by the committee? Seeing none. General announcements?
Excuse me, we do.
All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Ma'am.
So at the next meeting, we'll address the information from Mr. Ingram in regards to the burrowing owl and how we can coordinate some of those activities with our sister agency, the RCA, and we'll be bringing that report back to you.
And when do you foresee a follow-up on the StinkNet?
On the StinkNet, I'll have something definitely for February.
Okay.
Only one other additional item. We, as you know, we implement incidental take agreements with certain agencies that don't necessarily pull member agency permits from the city themselves. So we work with like Southern California Edison or Southern California Gas to allow them to have incidental take of SKR that's outside of the core reserve, but it goes through the member agency's jurisdictions. And we're very diligent in making sure that we allocate the mitigation fees that have been collected back to those agencies. But one of the things that we hadn't been doing is providing that agency an opportunity to keep track of the actual project that occurred in your area. Normally, if it's a regular project, the applicant comes in, they pull a permit, that permit is documented in the file, and the SKR fees are documented, and your jurisdiction has a record of that permit. So 20 years later, if they were to come back and apply to do some new or remodeled work at a particular site, then the information is there that the fees have been paid and the documentation coincides with the project. When they approach us for the take, we had not been documenting the actual project so that it's documented with the member jurisdiction file. And so we're going to be revising our policy. We'll bring that back to you, and I'm working with each one of your planning departments to make sure that whatever we implement fits in with your process so that we can actually make sure that the project is documented and there's a record in your file separate from just the mitigation fees being collected.
Now?
There is now, and so what we've done is with these agencies, they are, doing remediation projects, or they're doing upgrades for safety, or they're revising transmission lines. And so we communicate that the project is occurring because your agencies know that those projects are occurring. And but because these agencies aren't required to pull permits, then they approach the rchca for take. And we are authorized to provide take. Along with our habitat conservation plan, we're able to provide take. But there was a missing link, and so as we talked about, I was talking about the project with our chairman, Mr. Liesmeyer, and that piece was a missing link. And so we're making sure to revise our policy so that not only are we giving credit for the mitigation fees collected, but we're also being able to document what's happened and the fact that the project did occur, so that for years to come, that information is in your records.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do.
Exactly.
We do it exactly that way. I told you last year.
All right, thank you, Princess. And next meeting will be February 15th, 11 a.m. Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays. Thank you.
And we
And if
have
you wanna-
parking validations for those who need them.